Good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is Jeremiah, and this is the Dad's Club Clubhouse podcast. We have with us Dave today. Dave, what is one thing that every dad in this world should know right now from you?
Every dad in the world needs to know that your kids are not going to do what you say. They are going to become what you show them, what you consistently demonstrate. We see this a lot in the Facebook group and in other groups that I've been in where dads are like, how do I get my kids to do this or my kids doing that? And I don't know what to do about it. You can lecture, you can threaten, you can coax, you can plead about discipline and confidence and resilience and all that stuff all day long, but they're watching how you treat other people, specifically how you're treating them. They're watching how you speak to them, how you speak to other people, and most importantly, they're watching how you speak to yourself. And the way that you speak to yourself becomes their internal dialogue. So the short version is however you handle failure and success, how you handle stress, fatigue, setbacks, celebrate wins, all of that is going to become the blueprint for their self-image. And that's the thing that I always like to talk about with dads, because we are responsible for the next generation. And if we look around at some of the messes that are going on in the world right now, we can complain about it, or we can do our part to help clean it up by preparing the next generation to be men who lead.
That is great, Dave. That is an awesome piece of advice to take away from this. We're going to get right started, guys. Coming in. All right, guys. Welcome to the Dad's Club Clubhouse podcast. I'm Jeremiah, and I'll be your host. I have Dave with us today. This isn't a podcast about being a better dad. This is about being an honest one. The parts of the story we don't say out loud, before the kids, before the title, before anyone was watching. No fixing, no pretending, just real dads telling the truth about what it takes to stay. If you're listening and thinking, I've never said this out loud, you're in the right room. Welcome to the Dad's Club Clubhouse. All right, man. Welcome, Dave. How are you doing today?
Doing great. It's a beautiful, sunny, late winter, early spring day. I know it's not spring for another month, but I can hope.
Oh, dude, we've got snow melting right out here right now. So it's feeling like spring around here. We're in Northern Virginia. Dave's a little bit south of us in Tennessee. Now, Dave and I go back a little ways. We started working in the Dad's Club together about, 2 years ago now, almost 3 years ago. Dave is an old school strong man, and his plug is actually the Iron Tamer. So if you have anything you want to check out everything Iron Tamer on your social medias. Now, some men build strength to prove something, others build it to survive something. Tonight is about that difference. All right, we're gonna get right to it, guys. Let's get this music out of here. All right, Dave. Now, before fatherhood, how did you define yourself? Were you the strong man then?
Yes. Yeah. I've been fascinated with strength since I was a little kid. I'm a bit older than a lot of guys my age who have kids the same age as my kids. I'm 56. My son's 7. We got started late on that. But when I was a kid about his age, I was overweight, had a terrible stutter, got picked on. I mean, it was pure Gen X chaos, dodgeball, all of that stuff back in the day. And I got completely fascinated with comic books and superhuman powers and stuff, specifically superhuman strength. Really identified with the Hulk because he was fueled by anger and he was invincible. And then when the television show, The Incredible Hulk, came on with Lou Ferrigno, you have to put yourself in the position of what that was like culturally then. No one knew who Arnold Schwarzenegger was at that point. There were no Terminator, Conan, none of those movies. World's Strongest Man wasn't a thing that you could tune in and watch on sports channels. So to see Lou Ferrigno painted green made the Hulk become a real thing in my life. You know, before that, it was just like this imaginary character. But when I saw that, I'm like, okay, how does this guy get all big and strong like this? And so I, not knowing any better, I sought out the only way that I thought a person could get that way is I looked through the classified ads of the Sunday paper to find gamma radiation to bombard myself with, and it did not end well. Like I couldn't even find so much as a radioactive spider to bite me back then.
That's
So,
great.
but a few months after that, the movie Pump and Iron came on PBS. And so there was Ferrigno as himself, Schwarzenegger, Franco Colombo, all of the champion bodybuilders of that era centered around that 1975 Mr. Olympia contest. And so I learned there that those guys got big and strong by lifting weights. And so bodybuilding got me started in strength related things. Fast forward a few decades, I discovered kettlebells. And as a result of kettlebells, that became my profession. What I'm doing now is I coach kettlebells as part of what I do. But as adjacent to that, with that old school strength approach, I met a man named Dennis Rogers. I'm actually wearing the T-shirt from Dennis Rogers Old Time Strongman University, where I first learned how to do feats of strength like ripping decks of cards, bending steel bars, twisting horseshoes open, breaking chains, that kind of stuff. So I have defined myself as a strongman or a strength athlete for years. And then when my son got here, I realized that that was an incomplete definition at best. I still am that guy very much, but now that guy's primary focus is to set the example of what it means to be strong for my son. And that's not just about lifting things or bending things or ripping decks of cards in half. It's about compassion. It's about generosity. It's about helping other people to become the best that they can be. And so I'm really proud of the things that he does that reflect that. Where he's 7, so we're coming out of that early programming stage now. And I feel like we've got him on the right track with all that stuff now.
Now, you said strength and coaching weren't just things you did. They were who you were. What did that identity give to you?
The identity of being able to be strong relates back to that feeling of vulnerability that I had when I was a kid getting picked on.
Yeah.
The identity of being able to get up in front of someone and impart knowledge or help guide them, particularly groups of people or very large groups of people, as either a coach or as a keynote speaker. It's the other end of the spectrum from that fat kid with a stutter who got picked on. Now I have complete confidence in being able to get up in front of a group of any amount of people and talk about things that I know about and know that I can help deliver something of value through my own experience in doing that. So I have become the man that kid needed me to be.
That is powerful, man. Now, did that ever feel like an armor to you?
When I was in high school, probably, yeah. I was still like figuring out how to not be that kid that got picked on, and so I would, as I got stronger and as my strength developed and I got bigger, got older, and was able to do more things. I think that I could very easily retreat into that world of you can't hurt me because I'm strong.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that amount of vulnerability that enhances relationships might not have been there as much when I was, in my teens and 20s. Just, pretty typical teenager, young man figuring it out stuff.
Understood that, man. So I want to get into a little bit about the limits of that identity, what that came to. What happened internally when your value is tied to your performance? What happens when your value is tied to your performance?
Well, the drawback to that is that if for some reason you're not able to perform at your peak, or if you get injured or sick or just having an off day, then if you're not aware enough of your own capacity and your own potential, it can be very easy to get tied up into just the specific results. I'm not as strong as I was 5 years ago in this particular way, or I don't move as well as I did when I was in my 20s in this particular way. It can be very easy to get wrapped up in that. That's the negative side of it. The positive side of it is that once a person, and this is me speaking from my experience and also from people that I've coached, once a person has developed a certain amount of physical strength and been able to display that strength in a way that is meaningful for them. Not everybody wants to bend steel bars. Not everybody wants to rip decks of cards in half. But if you can do that, then you know that you've done something that you weren't previously capable of doing.
Absolutely.
You laid out a path on how to get there with a very clear, defined goal at the end. you took those steps and got there. And it's the old saying of, you can have people to guide you, but you have to walk that path alone. And it doesn't have to be feats of strength. You know, when I owned a gym, or when I work with online coaching clients now, some of them will almost apologetically tell me what their goal is, because they're comparing where they are now to what they see as my highlight reel, or someone else who is stronger than them's highlight reel. And I'm like, you've got to be able to not compare what you perceive as your worst to someone else's best, because there's no way to come out on top of that. What you have to do there is understand how that person got to be as good as they were, and then reverse engineer and take what's useful from that to apply to your own situation. So when I talk to people and they're wanting to press maybe a 35 kilo kettle, or a 35 pound, 16 kilo kettlebell over their head for the first time, and they're a grown man and they feel like that's weak, it's not weak. That's just where you are. It's only weak if you choose to stay there.
Yeah, man, that absolutely makes sense. Now, did you feel pressure? Did you always feel pressure to be the strong one throughout this coaching career that you had? Like through this, I mean, before you were a dad, obviously, but like when you had your gyms, things like that, did you always feel the pressure to be the strong one on the scene?
Yeah, that's just kind of how I see myself. That's a big part of my own self-image, you know.
Wow.
So just in I wouldn't say it's a pressure, like it's some sort of a negative thing. It's just like, I have brown hair. That's just part of who I am. Like, for example, last summer we had some friends who were moving out of the country, and they were unloading a bunch of their stuff, and so we wound up with their washer and dryer. And I had this plan. I'm going to throw it in the back of my truck. I'm going to back my truck up to my deck. I'm going to unload it onto the deck, and I'm going to take it down into the basement with, a set of hand trucks like that. Easy peasy, no big deal, right?
Yeah.
Well, I get the stuff loaded, and I get home, and I realize that I'm not able to get the truck all the way to the deck because we have a fence with a gate, and the truck won't fit through the gate. So I wind up having to take the washer and the dryer about 40 or 50 feet uphill through grass to some steps, then up the steps to the deck, then into the house, then down the steps into the basement. And so
Oh, wow.
I do all of that. And I'm 55 years old at the time. I do all that, and I get it all to the bottom of the steps, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, I probably should have asked somebody to help me with this. But it really didn't occur to me,
Yeah.
because for so long I have been the guy that people call when they need help moving.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of wrapped up in my identity.
That's awesome, man. You know what? You're actually making me think about how I define myself right now. What if somebody asked me what would my identity be? What would it be? But would you ever fear? Is there ever been a fear of yours if you took your strength away? Okay, if you say tomorrow you wake up and you are back to where you were in high school, do you fear that?
I don't fear it in the way you just described it, but
Uh-huh.
almost a year ago, and about 2 weeks from now will be the 1 year anniversary of this.
Yeah, I want to hear.
I had absolutely the most terrifying moment of my entire existence.
Mm-hmm.
And it very, very well could have taken away every bit of strength that I had. I was driving home. It was night on a road. I live out in the country. It was on a road that I had not driven before. And I'm headed down the road, and I'm headed to a curve, and a car is coming around the curve. It's drifted over the center line a little bit. I veer to the right to avoid it, not realizing that I'm at the curve at this point. And when I cut back, I overcorrected and wound up rolling down a hill and landing in a creek bed, lying on the driver's side of the truck. So I'm lying there, and I'm kind of coming to my senses after this very sudden trying to process why there sounds of crunching metal and all of that. And there's water right next to my face here, and I can feel the coolness coming off the water. And I look over, and my phone is lying in about 6 or 8 inches of water right next to my head. I pick it up and I shake it off, still laying on my side, and I can't hear out of my right ear. I'm like,
Wow.
well, that's weird. And so I go to scratch my ear, and it felt like it was full of gravel. And I figured out later it was shattered glass that had made it into my ear. How it didn't make it into my eyes, I do not know. But
Wow.
I had an ear full of shattered glass, and I'm looking around. So I unbuckle my seatbelt, and I'm standing up with my feet through the driver's side window in about 6 or 8 inches of cold creek water, my head sticking out through where the driver's side window was.
Mm-hmm.
in this creek bed, and I had the presence of mind to tell Siri to call 911, and Siri did, and the first responders came, and I thought, okay, I'm kind of scanning my body. I'm familiar enough with my body to know sensations and be able to know if anything terribly wrong's going on or if it's just minor discomfort. And I realized that I think I'm okay. My head hurt a little bit and there was a little bit of blood. Didn't really know where it was coming from. My elbow hurt and I realized I had a little cut on my elbow. But I said, okay, I'm going to get out of this truck. And I put my hands on the window and went to push down to like lift myself up, and the truck moved. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to roll this thing over on me trying to get out. And there's help on the way.
Wow.
And so when help got there, they cut the windshield out of the truck, and I crawled through it. I climbed up the hill, snapped a few photos of the truck just so I would have it. And then I got in the ambulance. They put the neck brace on me.
Little late to the party on that one, huh?
Well, I mean, it's standard procedure,
Yeah.
And as I was riding to the hospital, the first responder, the EMT, wonderful job that all those guys did. But this one in particular guy, I guess he was tasked with keeping me in conversation to assess me for any sort of, brain injury or anything like that, which, I'm grateful for that. We started talking about just various different things. And he saw I have a tattoo that has a kettlebell on it. And he says something about working out and kettlebells. And I told him about my history, my backstory.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was doing a completely different job that had nothing to do with strength. And I had gotten out of my element, and I was not particularly happy with what I was doing, but I was chasing some money doing that, right? And adjacent to all of this, that night flipped a switch in me, and that's why I'm back coaching again now a year later. It was literally just a couple of weeks later that I'm like, I'm not doing stuff that doesn't matter to me. I'm going to do what I'm best at and what fulfills me, and use that to propel myself forward. But the EMT was asking me about working out, and I told him about what I did. And he said, okay. And I did not realize the man looked confused until he stopped looking confused.
Yeah.
He sort of relaxed after I told him all that. He said, well, that makes sense. And I said, or he said something to the effect of that makes sense. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, I see several of these a month, 3, 4, 5 of these kinds of wrecks a month, and people just don't walk away from them.
Yeah.
And I wound up getting, I think, 2 or 3 stitches in my elbow and 2 or 3 staples in my head. And much later realized that I had a partial tear on the long head of my bicep on my right arm, but it never got diagnosed because it didn't hurt at the time. It's just something that I noticed after the fact. And he said, it makes sense if you have done that kind of training for decades, that your body is resilient enough to withstand this. I'm paraphrasing what he said. He said, people just don't walk away from this. And it was very prominent. He said this, if your training didn't save your life, it kept you from being seriously injured. And, as a dad was standing down there looking up thinking, I've just got to get home to my son. My son was 6 years old at the time. He cannot grow up without me. I have to be there for that. And the switch flipped, and here we are.
That's where I was heading with my next question, man. What was going through your head with your family? I know you are the dad. That's one of the things that I know that you identify with. What was going through your head about your son, your family, your wife? What was that?
I called my wife, and while I was still in the truck waiting for the first responders to get there, I called her and told her what the situation was. And she, of course, had the reaction that anybody would have, and started scrambling to find somebody to come sit with the boy, because this was at night and she was, going to come see me. But like the entire time it was, I've got to get out of here. I've got to get home. He needs me.
Yeah. Wow.
And that was the driving factor for all of it.
That's got to be intense.
Yeah. And like 12 hours later, I was home, but it was an intense 12 hours.
Now, how did it feel when that medic said, when you realized that the strength you built is what was getting you back home, that strength you spent so much time building in your life, that was what was going to get you back home?
It was a thing that I didn't realize it was important in that way until this situation happened. It was, I trained for resilience. I trained for strength. I trained to be healthy. It's not, I'm not a physique guy. I don't train to have 6-pack abs or anything like that. I train to be strong, and I train to be durable. And it never crossed my mind that no one expects to be in a situation like that.
Mm-hmm.
And until I was in a situation like that, it didn't really cross my mind that I was training to not just survive, but to come out on top and to come out strong from a situation like that. Because believe me, I played through every possible scenario that would intrude itself into my conscious thoughts of, what if I didn't make it? What if I made it but I'm a paraplegic? What if I made it but I lost a limb? What if I made it but I'm blind, or any of those things?
Those what
All of that
ifs.
stuff through my mind. And um, ultimately I realized that what I have to do is just let go of all of that, focus in on what actually is and on what I want what is to become. And it took me a while to be able to regulate those intrusive thoughts. It took me a while to be able to process that fear, but it's something that I've been able to do. And I didn't ever go see anyone professionally about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that it's a bad idea to do that, but part
Yeah.
of my training as a whole has been visualization, mental imagery, relating the mind to the body, and create a goal, see yourself performing that goal, put yourself in that position in your imagination, because your nervous system doesn't recognize the difference between something that's happening in 3D reality and something that's vividly imagined. So I
Mm-hmm.
was able to then adapt those same methods that I use to be able to get over, to a large degree, all of the mental and emotional trauma that was related to the accident.
That comes with a near-death accident, man. Because that is in reality what that could have been. I
Totally.
actually have experience as an EMT, and those kind of accidents people don't walk away from, man. Now,
Mm-hmm.
was this the first time in your life that your strength felt more like a responsibility? Like, because obviously it helped save your life,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. But did it feel like it was more of a responsibility in this time rather than an identity? Like, this is what I'm meant to be?
Yes, in a way. Like, there's layers to that, right? But
Yeah.
when I was a coach without a son, I had a responsibility to be strong and to be able to demonstrate strength and be able to help people get stronger. When
Yes.
he was born, that responsibility just magnified, because it's not just teaching someone how to lift something. Now it's helping shape the programming that this young human is going to view the world through long after I'm gone and generations past that. And then, of course, in the situation with the accident, it's like I have to be able to apply this to myself. I have to not allow this terrifying experience to define me detrimentally
Mm-hmm.
moving forward. There has to be some good to be gleaned from it. And it would be very, very easy to sit around and be terrified of it and not want to get in the car and just avoid all that. But then if I did that, I would be deliberately weakening myself in
Mm-hmm.
that area. I don't want to do that.
Yeah. No, not at all. Now I'm going to go off script here for a minute. You are one of the strongest fathers I've ever met in my life. I'm going to keep saying that. You are obviously going through a recovery process, not just physically, but mentally after this accident.
Mhm.
What did that look like to your son? If you were your son watching you, how did that, what do you think that looked like? That recovery process, showing your son you're still the strong man, that you're still able to overcome, you know, what were some of the tools that you used to get through that time? That's a tough time.
It is a tough time. And from the very beginning, even before the accident, I have always stressed the importance to myself, and so indirectly to him, that being able to be vulnerable emotionally
Mm-hmm.
is a form of strength.
Yes.
There's no strength to be had in shutting off emotions and not dealing with them, and shoving them into the basement and allowing them to fester and mold. So prior to the accident, I was always like, there was one time that I was it was on my dad's birthday.
Mm-hmm.
My dad had passed away that earlier that year. So a few months earlier, my dad had passed away, and his birthday rolls around. He passed away in May. Birthday rolls around in December, and I was missing him, and I was upset. And my son, I think he was 2 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Why does your face look like that?"
Oh
I said,
wow.
"Well, how does my face look?" And he said, "Sad." And so I explained it to him. That my initial thought was, "Oh no, Daddy's fine."
Oh.
Because that's sort of been ingrained into us. But I recognized that and thought, no, I'm gonna tell him what's going on. So I explained it to him that my daddy was gone, that I was never going to be able to hang out with him, and that he was not going to be able to see my son grow up and experience all that. And, I'm tearing up talking about it right now. I started crying, and, it probably took me a minute and a half to explain all that. Tears rolling down my face. I'm slobbering. I mean, I'm expressing that sadness through my body. And he just looks at me and says, "Oh, okay," and goes on about his business. And so I'm sitting there after the fact, realizing that what I had just done was normalize expressing grief and sadness and all of these unpleasant emotions as a man to someone who's going to grow up to be a man, and framing it in such a way that this is normal. It's okay to do this. And it's in fact healthy to do it this way, because if that stuff doesn't get expressed, it gets suppressed. And what gets suppressed becomes repressed, and then eventually gets expressed in a way that is not the best for the person who's kind of shoved it into the closet. Right.
Yeah. I want to put that in the description for this, what you just said.
Sure.
That's great.
Sure.
I'm going to
So,
coin that with you. I'm going to use that.
absolutely.
That's
So after the wreck, as I'm going through the process of periodically he'll catch me like kind of staring off into space, and it'll often be because I've had some sort of just an intrusive thought pops in, or a memory of that. Like for a while, anytime we would be out, or even at home, if sirens and ambulance lights and police lights started coming by, or fire trucks or whatever, it would give me a bit of a jolt, and I would kind of turn into this hyper attentive state. And he picked up on that, and he would ask me what was going on. I'd say, "It's nothing. That just startled me a little bit. It's no big deal. I'm fine. I know that I'm safe. I've got to convince my body that it's safe." And I would show him how I breathe through things like that. And so the really cool thing is, sometimes along the way, he'll see me getting frustrated, or see me getting upset, or something like that. And he'll say, "You know what I do? I do calm down breaths." And he'll start breathing. So he'll start leading me in
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. So
isn't that crazy how that works out, man?
It's beautiful. It's so beautiful.
So after the wreck,
mm-hmm.
How did your relationship with strength change? Now, because I know already, I watched it. It was almost like you gave up that chasing you were doing right away. Yep. And you're back out in the shed wrenching on kettlebells. Yep. How long did that take? Seconds, minutes, a day?
Unconsciously or subconsciously, by the time I got to the hospital, I think I knew that.
Damn.
Like, I think I felt it. Consciously, I still had to process everything, because that was a lot of input. Mm-hmm. But within a few days, maybe a week or two of that happening, I hadn't made any conscious decision, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to, but it was in my mind. I miss doing that. I'm good at doing that. It helps people to do that. There's no reason for me not to do that. And so I started kind of thinking of it in those terms, and got a phone call. In this day and age, phone rings, you don't know the number, you don't answer it.
Yeah.
So this guy leaves me a message, and it was really interesting. He was a local guy from Nashville. He left me a message, fairly long message, that said, "I ran across someone talking about you on a kettlebell subreddit on Reddit." I'm never on Reddit. Like, I have an account. Then I had done some stuff like several years ago, but had never really paid attention to Reddit as a social media platform. Someone on there said something about you. I looked you up. I'm in Nashville. I'd like for you to teach me how to use these things. And I called him back and talked to him, and I'm like, I don't really do that anymore, because in my mind, in my logical mind, I'm still doing the other stuff that I was doing. And I don't really do that anymore, but I'll do a one-off with you. And frankly, I needed some money, right?
Yeah.
So I went and I did one session with him, what felt like about 20 or 30 minutes, but it was actually about 2 hours. And I came away just completely energized and completely up and feeling wonderful. He had a good experience. He signed on as a client for several months after that. In fact, the reason he stopped being a client is because he and his wife wound up with her pregnant. And when the child shows up, he's like, "I got to cut all these extra expenses because Dad." Yeah, and I'm like, "Oh, you get it." But that experience was like, okay, consciously, I'm going to start pursuing this now. So it was interesting to me that, like, unconsciously, it was brewing around enough that someone reached out and found me without me having to go look them up. And then
Universal.
after that, several other things happened similar to that. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to start, using social media for good and putting content out that's related to that. And that's been the primary vehicle that I've started back in, and I'm rebuilding the business with now.
Yeah. Now, as a creator, everybody, myself, I have watched Dave's numbers escalate quite substantially over the past few months. We're going to give a chance. We're going to go ahead and plug Dave again real quick. Look up everything Iron Tamer. That's Iron Tamer, one word. Catch it on all socials. You're going to know who you're looking for. You're going to see him, believe me. Now, what does strength mean to you as your son when he depends on you coming home? This is back to your son now. What does that mean to you when somebody relies on you coming home, like from this accident?
Coming home from the accident, it was really interesting because there have been sort of flow state experiences that I've had through the years where I'm doing something, training up for a feat that's particularly difficult, or an event or a presentation that's particularly important in my mind.
Yeah.
And paraphrasing a quote that I heard not too long ago from Napoleon Bonaparte.
Wow.
And it's something to the effect of, I see only the goal, the obstacle must give way. So it's not even a matter of overcoming things or smashing through obstacles. It's just that they're not even there. I just see the end target, and whatever path I need to take to get there is going to get me there.
Wow, that's
And so
great.
knowing that he needs me to be there for him is a huge driver for me. We did a little over a month ago. We went and spent the night in a cave with part of his scouting troop. He's in the Cub Scouts for the first year this year. And it was a pretty physically demanding thing to carry all the gear from the parking lot up to the entrance to the cave, and then to actually navigate all into the cave and to the camping area, set all the gear up. And then it's like, oh, well, it's, 7:30 at night. We're going to go on a tour of the cave now. And there was a lot of up and down, and he was getting tired. I had to carry him for a little while at one point, and he's not a small kid. He's 73 pounds now.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of, I have to be able to do those things for him, to let him be strong enough to do things independently when he's able to, or when he wants to, but also be there for him when he's not able to do things, when he needs to be picked up and carried because he's so exhausted, or because he just needs a break, or whatever. So training for that kind of stuff is really a huge part of it at this point. Because the way I feel about it is, I want him to be the best man that he can be. And as a dad, I think we all can relate to that. Yeah. We have to lead by example. And, at age 56, which I still identify as 27, so whatever.
Right.
At age 56, I'm doing things that I wasn't able to do in my 30s now, because I'm of the opinion that I can't lead him if I can't keep up with him.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm in a social media group and I hear dads on there bitching and griping about being 38 years old and feeling old because they have a kid they can't keep up with or whatever, I'm like, dude, this isn't going to improve.
Yeah.
Unless you change course.
Proactive.
And so for me, I have to be proactive. I have to stay on that course. I have to be that guy for him. And at the same time, now that I am back in the strength coaching realm, it's important for me to be able to walk the talk the best I can in the areas that I'm best at.
Yeah. That leads me to my next question, Dave. Actually, how do you balance training hard with staying present in your family? Not just, when I say family, I mean not just your son, your wife, because I know that spouses, partners, they take work too. What does that look like to you? What's that? How's that work?
It's really central to my philosophy in doing things physically that hard doesn't have to be hard. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, if you scroll through Instagram, through any sort of fitness social media, you'll get bombarded with fitness quote unquote influencers who are on there. Usually they're yelling, they have veins sticking out of their forehead. None of them seem to be able to find their shirts, and they're very shiny, and they're talking about if you don't have a six pack, you don't have discipline. And like, there was one guy that's in that realm that was speaking at an event, and he brought his two daughters up, and I believe one of them was like 13 and one of them was younger than that. And he brought
Mhm.
them up on stage and said, I told them that they could have a shopping spree if they had visible abs at this event. Girls, show them your abs. So he's installing body
Mhm.
dysmorphia. He's sexualizing his children by
Yeah.
saying show off your body in front of this. And I'm like, the opposite of that. That's who I have to be.
Yeah. Right on.
So the whole alpha wolf thing, it's interesting to me too, as a tangent on that. If anybody calls himself an alpha wolf, they truly don't understand biology, because wolves are matriarchal and the alpha is always a female. So that means that you're really the head bitch if you're saying that you're an alpha wolf. Like, like us. Um, so
I'm going to remember that.
my approach in training is that a good training session means that I can go out tomorrow and do it again. I'm not a guy who goes and just like tries to grind myself into the ground, because if you constantly are attempting to push yourself past a limit, eventually you'll hit that limit. And by definition, when you hit a limit, something has to break.
I was just going to say
So,
that.
so my fundamental philosophy is not push past your limits. It's identify your limit and then honestly move towards it and stay as far away from it as you can at the same time. And
Wow.
what I mean by that is, if you can imagine it's a circle and right in the center is you sitting on the couch. This is physical limitation, right? You're sitting in the center of that circle. You're sitting on the couch watching TV, having a good time. That circle represents something physically that if you go beyond that line, something's going to break. Lifting a particular weight, running a particular distance, do whatever your thing is. If you exceed that, your body will break,
Yeah.
because that's the true definition of a physical limit. Now, there are mental limitations that have nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
So by addressing the mental limitations, one of which is I have to push past my physical limitation, and by staying inside the comfort zone and expanding the comfort zone, eventually you'll engulf an old limit.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm
and,
tracking.
and so like a real life example of that might be if I have someone comes to me and they want to press a particular weight over their head. And let's say that they're able to do 16 kilos in a kettlebell one arm press right now, and they want to be able to do 32 kilos. Uh, and I'm like, okay, you can do 16 for how many? Oh, 3 or 4. How many times can you do 20 or 24 kilos? Maybe one. Okay, that represents your limit. How do we get you to 32? By doing a lot with 16 until
Yeah.
16 becomes ridiculously easy. And then 20 and 24 become easier. And so
Yeah.
the easier we make the hard things, the easier hard things become.
Yeah.
So we gradually, over time, working with the body, allow that comfort zone to expand. And the thing we have to keep in mind is that our bodies are constantly adapting to whatever stimulus we're involved in. There is no off switch to it. So
Mhm.
I can't force my body to adapt any to a strength training scenario any more than I can go outside in the sun, take off my shirt and go, tan, damn it, tan, and
Yeah.
force my body to tan. There's stimulus,
Yeah.
there's response, then there's adaptation. And when we honor the biology that way, we can perpetually grow.
Yeah.
I've heard it described by one of my coaches as move forward in any direction, because at some point what you're doing is going to get stale, and to get to that same place you're going to have to take a different path. Recognize that instead of trying to force things, because when you force things, things don't turn out well.
Things break.
Things break.
Things break. Now we're going to shift a little bit now. Um, you moved slowly, right? Slowly from the how strong can I be to how many men, fathers, boys I can help, right? I want to hear a little bit about that. You said your focus shifted from your own strength to helping other men build theirs. What sparked that change? I know it wasn't just your accident. I know it wasn't just your son. What was it?
It was primarily when my son got here. My wife and I had a very difficult time with conception and getting him here. So it
I remember.
wasn't like a lot of cases where someone winds up unintentionally having a child and then they become a parent, or they decide they're going to become a parent and they, 3 months later somebody's pregnant and they go
You
on
knew
about
you
their
wanted
business.
it.
It was a very long drawn out process, and
Yeah.
anyone who's ever dealt with that sort of stuff knows that as you try something and it fails and you progress to the next thing and then it fails, and you progress to the next thing and it fails. And the sense of overwhelming grief that can come because this person that you've never met doesn't exist yet. And then you find out that what you're trying to do to get them here failed. It's a sense of loss that is really difficult to describe for anyone that's never been there. And so when the miracle finally happened, and like, yes, you're pregnant, yes, you're having this child, I was overwhelmed with, okay, what kind of a man do I want him to grow up to be? What kind of a man do I need to be for him? And so I literally took out a piece of paper, and it stuck to my bulletin board right on the other side of my desk there, still to this day. And I wrote out different characteristics, different qualities, different things that I thought were important to impart to him, to help him be the kind of person that I would want him to be happy. And then I looked over the list and I'm like, I'm falling short on so many of these things myself. Yeah. So pregnancy for my wife became part of a personal development journey for me that I didn't even know that I needed to be on, to get myself in a position mentally and emotionally, along with physically, to be the kind of person that I wanted my son to have as a dad. And when my son was about 18 months old was when my dad passed away. And I had a great relationship with my dad. My dad was a great guy. Everybody has their flaws, but he was a great guy, and he loved me very much. He loved my son very much. And right at the end for him, he had lung cancer. And he was very coherent, but his body started shutting down. And I went and spent a day with him on a Thursday. He passed away the following Monday. And we spent the entire day just hanging out, talking. Anything that needed to be said got said. Anything that needed to be resolved got resolved between us, because we both knew that we didn't have much time left. He knew that it could be counted in days. And one of the things he said was, I'm talking about how he feels about it. And he says, I'm okay. Everything wears out. My body's worn out, and it's time for me to move on. So he was in a very good place with that. But one of the things that he said to me was that he wanted me to promise him to be a better father to my son than he was to me. And I'm like, but you were a great dad. He said, no, I know I did a good job, and I did the best I could, but don't make mistakes that I made. And we talked about some of the things that those were. And he's like, encouraging me to improve myself so that every concurrent generation benefits from it. And I took that quite seriously, as like literally as part of my father's dying wish is to be the best dad that I can be. Yeah. And the other thing was he wanted me to promise him that I would let my son know as much as I could about him. Those were his two like dying wishes around me and my son and his grandson and the relationship there. And so every day that guides me. Every day that is part of how I approach things. And one of the things from that list that I was talking about, I wrote out earlier, I kind of distilled it all down into one guiding, overarching principle or catchphrase that will encompass all this, and I can then find details from. And the idea was, it comes from a book a guy named Wallace Wattles wrote called The Science of Getting Rich. It's called The Impression of Increase. And he's talking about things from an entrepreneurial business standpoint there of always give your customer more in use value than they give you in cash value. And I thought, can this be expanded? And I wound up with the idea of with every single interaction that happens with this child from now on, find a way to somehow leave him better off than he was than before that interaction. And it's a difficult thing to do. And sometimes it's just, helping him navigate a bad feeling or making him giggle, or sometimes it's unpleasant. Sometimes it's holding a boundary and something that he wants, but he's not allowed to do, and knowing that what he wants is not necessarily what's best for him, and holding a boundary like that. Yeah. But being able to instill that idea of everything that I'm doing with you is an attempt on my part to help you be better, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. Usually it's pretty pleasant though.
Wow, Dave. That's incredible, man. What you just said is incredible, man. I want to dig a little bit more into your dad now. Your dad sounds like a great father.
He was.
And so you already said that you carry on his basic legacy, his promises, and everything that you do. Now, what does that look like teaching your son about your father? What does that look like?
My dad was a musician,
Yeah.
and I encouraged my son, and I was a musician haphazardly for a while too. I did it professionally a little bit, but I wasn't great, or else I'd still be doing it. But he's taken an interest in music, and so I encouraged that.
Yeah.
Like one of the things he wanted was a drum kit, and we wound up getting him one, and it is sitting right behind me in this office right now. And
Yeah.
you know, whereas some people might get annoyed because a child's banging on drums, I hear his banging and clanging with the drums and think that is just undeveloped potential right there, and I'm not going to stop him from doing anything just because it's inconvenient for me to experience it right now.
That's the same way I look at it, man.
And my dad was very much like that with me when I wanted to learn how to play music, when I got into strength. You know, he didn't know anything about strength.
Yeah.
But he was strong. At the time when I was a kid, he had done carpentry work and you know, manual labor. So he was the first person I ever saw lever a sledgehammer. What I mean by that is you take a sledgehammer and you hold it out at arm's length and you bring it down and touch your nose.
Yes.
And which actually became a signature feat of mine.
You can do that. I can't.
Yeah.
I imagine that you can. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. I actually developed a signature feat to kind of bring things that I love into a personal expression, where I would grab a kettlebell with one hand and a hammer with the other hand and get into a position where the kettlebell was overhead and the hammer is extended out, and I bring the hammer down and kiss my nose with it and take it back up.
Wow.
And that kind of converges all those worlds, because another guy who is, and this is a complete tangent, but I have to mention him. I learned feats of strength from a guy named Dennis Rogers. And Dennis' primary teacher was a guy named Slim the Hammerman, who was exactly the same age, like within a few months, as my dad. And so when I met him, he was like my strongman grandpa, and he was famous for leverage lifting hammers. And so I got to learn from him directly, and to tie that all back around with my dad and everything. It's a very fulfilling thing to do that. And then to see my son, like when he was 2 or 3 years old, grab a croquet mallet and do the same thing at grandma's house. Very, very fulfilling.
Dave Whitley, everybody. Thank you, Dave. Thank you for that wonderful interview. I'm excited to have you on here again. You've got a great man. You phenomenal, man. You really embody what it means to be a good father, a good husband, and a good son as well. So thank you again, everybody. I want you to make sure that you check out everything Irontainment. It's on all your socials, Instagram, Facebook, all that, the above. And we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thanks again, Dave.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys. Again, I'm Jeremiah with the Dad's Club Clubhouse. We're going to let you go. Thank you.